It's kind of like every kid's dream to be a knight.
He's putting his visor down.
Our vision is pretty restricted. We only have about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch gap between the upper and lower side of the helmet. Obviously our balance is affected because we've got 60 to 70 pounds of extra weight on us between the armor, the lance, which is about 6 pounds, a shield, which is another 5 or 6 pounds. So it's a big juggling act.
Jeffrey Hedgecock has been jousting for a decade and making armor as a full-time profession for 25 years.
Most of my armors start around 25 to 30,000 and go up from there. Typically, it's a minimum of about 6 months, sometimes a bit more, depending on the complexity of the armor. There's usually over 200 plates in an armor and several hundred rivets. Armors are a system. Every piece of an armor is designed to fulfill a specific function, and they all need to work together to do their job in protecting the wearer. So if you have pieces of armor from one century mixed with pieces of armor from another century, they might not necessarily do the best job of protecting their wearer as they could. The thing that struck me when I was in junior high school, which first turned me on to it, was the idea of the human form in steel. So if you want to think about that idea of a sculpture in steel, an artwork in steel, which was the human form, and the idea that it was all made of plates and moved on each other and the body could be inside it, that's really what started my fascination with armor. It's a hard thing to wrap a human body that's got to move in a rigid material. It's an unforgiving medium, and to be able to achieve it it's quite a challenge, and it's quite an accomplishment.
The process begins with selecting a style of armor and creating a pattern to cut from steel.
So I use different thicknesses of steel, and I trace the paper patterns out just with a typical felt marker, and then use what's called a Beverly shear, which is a shear that can cut many different types of curved items using the sheet metal that I use.
Then Hedgecock will hammer them into shapes on various anvils. Then planish or smooth the surface.
They'll end up having a finish very similar to this.
Then move on to tempering the metal in a kiln to harden it for battle.
And what that does is it tempers them. It brings the toughness back into the plate. It reduces the brittleness. This is hand-formed, heat-treated spring steel. It's called 1050 spring steel, and it's a steel that's very tough when it's heat-treated properly. It'll take a blow and deform, and then spring back to where it started at. So it's a really tough material. It really makes great jousting armor.
The process ends with Hedgecock polishing the pieces to a mirror-like shine for final assembly. But it's hard to make armor without wanting to put it to use. So Hedgecock learned to joust in 2003 after a visit to England. Now he runs his own tournament.
The Tournament of the Phoenix is an international jousting and knightly combat tournament, which we've been holding since 2007. It's a 3-combat style tournament. Jousting is the #1 thing. We have 4 sessions of jousting through the weekend. We also have foot combat with poleaxes, where we stand on foot in full armor and beat each other to a specific number of blows.
In addition to a good suit of armor, a modern knight needs a special kind of horse.
We don't go after a specific breed of horse, but we look more at the type of the horse, whether it's athletic, whether it's energetic, whether it has the right mindset for the activity.
That mindset requires the horse to have an affinity for charging at full gallop towards another horse where the rider is armed with an 11-foot pole trying to knock your rider off.
Knights were the fighter pilots of the Middle Ages, and they needed to not only be able to defend themselves, but to attack the other guy. If you're lying on your back in a pile of mud, you're not going to be very effective. So you need equipment that's light enough where you can move in it, light enough where you can do your job. If it's too heavy, it's useless.
This weekend, Hedgecock's job will be to face 5 competitors from around the globe for the prize of the Gilded Phoenix. He'll also be upholding his knight's motto, honor only among equals. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.